Hi, I'm Dr. Bernard Starr with a new edition of Active Aging, programs that introduce you to vital and vibrant people whose accomplishments do much to challenge the myth that getting older means losing creativity or zest for life. First, we'd like you to meet the Dancing Grannies. Then it's back to school with men and women on a new learning curve. And finally, meet a financial superstar returning to his showbiz roots. Of all the activities that keep people feeling young and healthy, the prize for the most fun undoubtedly goes to a group called the Omaha Dancing Grannies. They came to New York to perform for Encore Community Services at St. Malachy's Church. One of the dancers, Katie Kelly, may be familiar to you.
I have always wanted to do one thing, learn how to tap dance. When I was a kid, my mom and dad and I would go to the movies every Friday night. It was, it was during the Depression, and it was buck night. Everybody in the family could go for $1. Or it was dish night. They'd give you a free dish if you went to the movies. And on Friday nights, they played Hollywood musicals. Well, my dad, who was a farmer and a carpenter and a bartender and every other thing he could do to earn a living, he loved tap dancing. And his favorite tap dancer, other than Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly, was Eleanor Powell. And we would go every Friday night when the Hollywood musicals ran and just sit. I mean, this went on for years.
Katie always wanted to be a dancer, but she took a long way around to get there.
I was the movie and theater critic at NBC News. I got fabulous vacation times, don't tell anybody. And one of the vacations I took was to Vietnam. And up until that point, I had been happily reviewing movies and television for Live at 5, and that was when Sue Simmons and Jack Cafferty did the show. And the trip to Vietnam is the thing that turned me full circle. I did set up a tutoring program for Amerasian teenagers. And when I came back, I did a little more volunteer work along those lines, wrote a book. And by that time, enough time had passed that I wanted to do television, but I didn't want to do television. And the next thing you know, I ended up on 320 acres of prairie land out in Nebraska. I go to Omaha, and I had a friend who was a member of something called the Omaha Dancing Grannies. Well, I couldn't do a tap step if you paid me to at that time. So I quick ran out and found some adult tap dancing lessons in Omaha, started taking tap lessons, went to a couple of sessions with the Grannies, and they're very forgiving. I mean, they will take anybody. They will take anybody, but you have to stand in the back row until you get it. So I've been taking tap lessons now for the last 3 years, dancing out with the Grannies for a couple of years, and it has been fabulous. The rule is you have to be over 60, and you have to be a grandmother or a great-grandmother. And I have no children, but from the Vietnam experience, I have about 10 foster kids and 40 foster grandparents. They took me anyway. They said it counted.
The Grannies teacher gave us their history.
It was founded by a lady who danced the Orpheum Circuit as a young girl of 15. And she had several friends as she got older who said, "Gosh, you are such a good dancer. We have always wanted to dance. Would you teach us?" And she said, "Sure." So that's how it got started. And the rest of us heard about this group through different venues. We saw some of us saw it in the newspaper, word of mouth. And she taught this class for quite a few years until she was 87. And she passed away, and none of us wanted to quit. So I have been dancing all my life, never taught before, but the girls said, "Well, why don't you give it a crack, Pat? We don't want to quit." So I did, and I've been teaching the class for 15 years now. We are all grandmothers and great-grandmothers, and our ages range from early 60s, and we have one lady who will be 91 years old next year. She is adorable, and she keeps up. this just goes to show that you can do anything you want to if your mind and your body allows you to. And we will continue to do this as long as we can. Usually perform for retired folks, for churches, but we've performed for several private parties. We have done national conventions, and it's all fun. You know, we just have a good time.
We rehearse 2 hours every Monday, and then we dance out a couple of times a week. So the exercise alone is wonderful. But up here, you've got to learn the steps, then learn the routine, and the hardest part, then you have to remember it. So it really keeps the mind going.
We are not only enjoying each other as dancers, but of course at our age group, you know, we have some that are going through being widows, losing husbands, children. We support one another no matter what it is. And it's quite wonderful to have a support group outside your family. You know, your family is wonderful, but to have friends, oh, that's heavenly.
I think you have to keep doing things. You just cannot sit around. And you do things that you like to do, or you try things that you don't know whether you like or not. The only way you're going to find out whether you like something or you don't like, it's like food. You try it. If you don't like it, you don't order it the next time. If you can do it, you do it. And as far as I'm concerned, tap dancing, for me at least, beats woodworking. It's better than woodworking.
Dancing feet is one way to sustain an active life. Heading back to school is another.
These men and women were not at all happy about retirement until they discovered something that's become an important part of active aging all over the country, going back to school. They all learned that learning can be the key that opens new doors in their new lives. Youth is the time for adventures of the body, but age for the triumphs of the mind. Logan Purcell Smith. Colleges and universities are responding with programs designed for older students, like Marymount Manhattan College in New York, where the Center for Learning and Living offers courses in its continuing education program. We took a look at the Marymount program to see why it and programs like it are growing in popularity. The range of students is as wide as the range of classes.
I'm 92 years old. I came here after I retired. I felt like I needed a little structure, and for a few months after I retired, I didn't do anything, and I liked it, but then I needed a little structure, and I needed to have something that would be inspiring, and that's why I came to Marymount. I think you become very boring if you don't do a lot of things, and there's nothing like a bore that's boring.
A friend recommended it because I was finding it difficult to fill up a day sometime, and he recommended Marymount. I went there, got the brochures, and registered.
One can remain alive long past the usual date of disintegration if one is unafraid of change. Edith Wharton. I talked to Dr. Bernie Starr, gerontologist, about the need these programs are filling.
The retirement years may be the biggest chunk of our lives.
Why are so many people afraid of retiring?
Well, it's gotten a bad reputation. I mean, we've heard for a long time very bad advertisements about retirement. There's a lot of mythology about it, stereotypes that you've heard the stories about the people who retire and drop dead. And of course, the fact is that, and this is another way of looking at it, that there really is no such thing as retirement. The analogy that I like to use, and it's based on a joke, you remember the old-time comedian Myron Cohn? He used to tell a story about the jealous husband who comes home and he's suspicious of something, and he's looking under the beds and in the closets and whatnot. And sure enough, he opens the closet door, and there's a guy standing in there. And he looks at him and says, "What are you doing here?" And the guy says, "Well, look," he says, "everybody's got to be somewhere." You know, so I say the same principle applies to retirement. I mean, you got to be doing something. There's no such thing as doing nothing.
And what these people are doing is becoming students again.
It's a very stimulating atmosphere because the people involved in it are professionals from all walks of life.
What I like best about the classes are the interest of the teachers and their professionalism and how they are so eager to impart their knowledge and how interesting they make it.
What I like best about my experience at Marymount has been, well, the quality of the teaching staff, which amazes me since most of them are volunteers. And I'm very impressed that they give their time and talent to teach us. I'm impressed by the quality of the students.
I think that is to try to establish a new government.
This faculty they admire doesn't get paid, and they put in a lot of hours. Many of them are students and teachers.
I teach mainly because I really like to make people think. And it gives me a great lift if that happens. You know, somebody once said, I want my students to have that aha moment, and that's really what I'm teaching for, people to just open their eyes and realize something they hadn't known before. I do it because it's really my life. It gives me great pleasure, and it keeps me as young as possible, and I feel I'm doing something worthwhile.
I find it much easier to share with people close to my own age than I did with people so very much younger than I. Of course, when I began teaching, I was much closer to them in age, but I kept getting older and they stayed the same. And the gap became wider and wider. We must give back what we have so richly experienced ourselves, and we then get back more than we give.
Teaching is a very new experience. I never taught before. I was an international trade consultant. I was a lobbyist, always active in politics, but the idea of teaching was something new. And to a group of your peers is a little bit different.
I didn't know whether the people that I was to be teaching would be interested in the subjects that I was interested in. But I found that people our age tend to reflect and look back and try to figure out why they got to where they were and whether they wanted to really get there. And they ask more interesting questions than young people, I think.
There's another important element to going back to school.
Marymount gives people a point to socialize from and with, and it gives them a structure in their life where they can come, meet, make new friends, and learn a lot about life.
It's not only the women who value the opportunity to socialize.
The Romeos really are retired old men eating out. We started it about 6-7 years ago with 4 members of our class at Marymount. We usually have discussions on politics, which most of them agree on. Someone will bet one way or the other. What are the best movies they saw? What are the best plays? Where their wives are? And of course, what they really love to talk about, it's which doctor they saw this week, which doctor they're going to see next week, and the stock market. And we fight for the best seat at the table to watch the pretty girls go by.
One last quote Few people know how to be old. The folks you just met have found their answer. Well, back to school is one thing, but can an ex-showman, ex-Hollywood reporter, disguised for 40 years as a businessman, go back to Broadway? Jim Lebenthal of Municipal Bond fame is about to find out with his debut performance at the Thalia Theater in Manhattan.
If you don't know, I am Jim Lebenthal, taking you back to my 7th birthday, and a present for my Aunt Dorothy that would shape my life forever. Of course, what isn't life-shaping when you're 7? But this was something that turned me into what I am today. A truck from Railway Express pulled up to the door with a package. When I unwrapped it and looked inside and saw a whole carton full of my favorite food, I said, wow, how did Aunt Dorothy know that I loved shredded coconut? I took a handful and stuffed it in my mouth. Big treat. Wouldn't you know, it was packing material. But nestled in all that shredded paper was a Kodak box brownie, and that primitive camera would train my eye forever to look for the unexpected in the ordinary and find life in whatever exists.
And that was just the beginning. It wasn't long before early Kodak gave way to speed graphic and fancy movie camera and moved on to an almost Oscar-winning short.
An unexpected something jumped in front of my car out west on Route 66 48 years ago. Whatever it was, I jammed on the brakes to avoid hitting it, running it over, and killing it. In that tire screech, I realized it was a tumbleweed blowing across the highway. But that tumbleweed fooled me into thinking it was alive, and I instantly knew what I had to do. You rascal, you tumbleweed, you. I'm going to make a movie about an imp that gets its comeuppance, starring you, and together we're going to win an Academy Award. My short did get nominated for an Oscar. Nominated. That's when they say the envelope please and the winner is... Well, maybe that's what you hear. All I heard was the envelope please and the loser is. When I got out of Princeton in 1949, Life magazine gave me a startling choice of becoming a life photographer or a life writer. For me, it was no contest. At 10 years of age, I owned a Voigtlander camera, a Rolleiflex at age 12, a speed graphic at 15. As a 19-year-old, Life magazine had already made this shot that I took, their picture of the week. Tennis fans on their stomachs at the US Open watching a hot match going on behind a windbreak. Could there be any question which I'd choose? Right, writer. After all that education, what? Take pictures? Photography? Photography isn't work, it's fun. Writing is work, more like what a job should be. What nutty, fun-filled, mindless good times. Can you believe I ever pulled the plug on such a glamorous job? I rode to the Oscars in her limo with Grace Kelly. I got a yacht out of the great silent movie maker, Max Sennett. He and I co-authored a special Keystone Cops comedy to run as stills in Life magazine. I dealt with the Hollywood rebels and got a truculent James Dean to open up his soul for life. And I personally gave Rock Hudson a few more years in the closet so he could appear on the cover of the magazine without corrupting the morals of Life's readers. How did I do it? By dispatching Rock off to Mexico to marry his agent's secretary, Phyllis Gates.
So what brought this irrepressible showman back to the staid world of all things municipal bonds?
I am a quitter. I'm a quitter. When I get burned out at a job, best jobs in America, Disney, Life magazine, when a vacation would do, I quit. And usually there was a boss, an editor, or someone who would say, oh, please don't quit, Jim, please don't quit. And I would always threaten to go into the family bond business. I had a boss at NBC who, when I said, George, I'm leaving, if I don't make as much money as an electrician, I'm going to quit. And George said, you'll never make as much money as an electrician in your whole life. Quit. And I turned on my heel and left. I went home and told my wife, darling, I'm quitting. And nobody said no. So I followed through, and I came down to Lebenthal and Company, the municipal bond firm which was run by its co-founder, my mother, Sarah Lebenthal.
Now, I could have sold him exactly what I want to sell him and not go into that lengthy explanation. But there's something within me that won't let me do that. Are you taking I mean, 3 o'clock and I'm having lunch.
And I said to Sarah Lebenthal, Mom, I'm joining Lebenthal and Company. My mother's answer when I said I'm joining Lebenthal and Company, and she had never needled, she had never wheedled, she had never pulled and tugged or tried to exert undue influence, she said, good. You finally got all that foolishness out of your system. Of course, I never did get all that foolishness out of my system. I'm Jim Lebenthal getting a charge from power plants built by bonds.
They can't tax it and they can't take it away from you the minute interest rates come down. Why settle for peanuts?
Asked if it was difficult selling these ads to his new boss, his mother, Jim couldn't have been more direct.
She was indulgent. I believed in advertising, big splashy ads to spread the word. And Mother encouraged me. Others in the company thought it was throwing money away. She was competitive.
How was it going from mother as boss to daughter as boss?
Let me tell you the difference between working for Mother and working for my daughter, which I now do. She is my boss. Alexandra and I actually have a show that we put on called Lebenthal versus Lebenthal. And we take opposite sides, point, counterpoint, of any subject, and thus we balance our presentation.
When we asked if this showman turned salesman turned performer was now retired.
I am not retired now. I am very inefficient. I wander in at 9:30 and 10 o'clock in the morning. Now maybe I compensate by being here till 7 o'clock every evening. But that is the only concession that I have made to age, is being a bit of a slob as far as deportment is concerned. I think I would like retirement if I could get my old job back at Disney or at Life or not an ad agency, but NBC. I'd love to be out in the street with my handy cam shooting vignettes for a show I have called Crazy About New York, a show that's only on the internet. Egged on constantly by the Go Sign Man on 20,000 street corners around the city, telling my heart, do it. Just do it, do it, do it. I go poking into the city's heart, soul, and ribs, ready to pounce on the unseen. Unseen because it's right there under your nose, and bring it right up there in front of your eyes on my website, crazyaboutnewyork.com.
But what about his new role as performer, doing the speaker circuit? How has that been received? Jim was pretty definite about his plans.
At the end of the presentation, people came up to me and said, that was very interesting. The guffaws were more titters. The nodding agreement that it was, yes, a very interesting presentation, kind of told me that a Broadway show, that version, is not. But I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to make it a Broadway show. But I am concerned about unhappiness in the older person. And I think I've already hinted at it, so let me talk to myself, let me advise myself, and not tell the rest of the world what they should do. I mentioned my website, Crazy About New York, and these vignettes. I have a slice idea how many hits I get, whether anybody sees it. And I almost don't care, and I get the same satisfaction out of completing one of those little 2- and 3-minute vignettes as I used to get in the old days, getting a page and 2 halves out of Life magazine. The hobby element of those of going out in the street with my handy-dandy Sony Handycam, the editing on my handy-dandy Final Cut Pro, the satisfaction of doing those completed works of art, though it is the hobby hour, though I have no audience, is as fulfilling as anything I've ever done. Just watch and discover why I'm crazy about New York.
Yet, even now, as Jim Lebenthal pursues his love affair with New York, sometimes the showman gets mixed up with the salesman. Witness this little scene at Jim's favorite West Side restaurant.
And would you like tap water or bottled water?
How can you ask me, Jim built by Bonds Lebenthal, if he wants bottled water, when New York City water, tap water, is known around the world as the best tasting water on earth?
Certainly. I'm sorry.
And especially, since every drop of it is Catskill Mountain rainwater that has been brought here by 100 miles of tunnels and aqueducts and 6,000 miles of water mains under the streets of New York City, all of it built by the tax-free bonds I sell. How could you ask me?
So it'll be the tap water then?
No, I'll have the bottled water.
As Jim Lebenthal demonstrates so well, it's never too late to reawaken and sharpen creative skills for self-fulfillment. It's a philosophy we at Active Aging endorse wholeheartedly and recommend to you. Before we sign off, many thanks to all the volunteers who bring their professional expertise to Active Aging programs. We'll be back with more stories about interesting, actively aging people. See you then.